Someone who's been speaking up for the poor, the oppressed, the downtrodden for 35 years. And you know what? One of the things that people have said is that Jeremy Corbyn is going to be chewed up by David Cameron at PMQs.
Yeah.
This is the master flim-flam flip-flopper. The man who has a leash on his neck from the right wing of his own party, the Europhobes. This is a man who will be standing against Jeremy Corbyn if he wins, who has had 35 years of consistent politics, principles and values. Compare that to David Cameron, and I can't wait to see the look on their faces. So if you're tired of being on your knees, tired of being kicked about by the Thatcherites, the neo-Thatcherites, and all that they stand for, if you want to get up on your feet, if you want to fight back, if you want to build a better society, a better economy, then I would say stand up and stand with Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you very much.
Clive, thank you very much. And a big thank you to Clive, not just for today, but for winning Norwich South in the general election. Being a fantastic friend and comrade in all things, and particularly in Parliament, and also for pushing me to stand for this position and making sure that he was one of those that got us the nominations, the 36 MPs that finally nominated. Clive, you're a star. And you should be very proud if you're from Norwich South to have Clive as your MP, because there's somebody there who does understand the issues, does understand the politics of what's going on in this country, and is not afraid to speak out and say it like it is. I want to say, first of all, beyond that, a big thank you to all those that have organised this Burston rally, not just today, but for all the many, many years it's been going on, because they've done a great job, and in doing that job, they help us to understand our own history. So let's hear it for all those that have organised Burston, not just today, but all the other days. It gives us an opportunity to come together, as does Tolpuddle, as does the Durham Miners Gala, as does Burford for the Levellers Day, and so many other events, because we have to reclaim our own history. The Higdons stood up for working class children and working class families. They stood up against massive odds of very powerful landowners, very powerful Tories on the county council, and they stood up and they asked for support. And they got that support. The support that came from the mining communities, the railway unions, public service unions, many others, to ensure there was money to build the strike school, to ensure that school was supported. And in doing that, they declared two things. One was solidarity of people in struggle, but they also declared another thing about the way in which the Labour movement, our movement, values education for learning, not just as a commodity. So we remember them today, and we learn lessons from those people. And I want all our children in school, of course, to understand the history of our society and of the world as a whole, but also to understand that the great achievements of our society, the National Health Service, Human Rights Act, all those issues didn't come about by accident. They came about because of popular struggle, popular demand, people with vision prepared to stand up against the orthodoxy of the day. Our children should grow up understanding the power they have in their own hands of understanding history, developing from it, and getting the prize they need of a decent, more equal society, protecting our environment, human rights for all those issues that are so key in education. I'm not sure Michael Gove fully understood all that. In fact, I don't think he understood it at all. All he and the Tories ever understand is the balance sheet of education and the elitism within our society. We can, must and will do something very different and very better in the future. I'm grateful you've invited me here today to speak at the rally. I've been at this rally many times before, and I think of people such as Bob Crow and Tony Benn and Joan Maynard and so many others that have spoken here over the decades. Fantastic place, fantastic opportunity. This campaign, at one level, is about the leadership of the Labour Party, but at another level, it's about something else. We started this campaign the end of May, beginning of June, with the great difficulty of getting the nominations. We got them after a lot of pressure and a very decent decision taken by quite a lot of MPs who thought, well, there should be a democratic choice. We didn't start from a very strong position, and I'm very grateful to the unions that supported from the very beginning. Unite, Unison, Communication Workers Union, Unison being my own union, Fire Brigades Union supporting, ASLEF, RMT, TSSA, Prison Officers Association, Bakers Union, Socialist Health and Socialist Education Associations, all supported. And we've asked for and got large numbers of volunteers to help in this campaign. As of last week, we'd signed up 15,000 volunteers to join in our campaign. And it's been expensive because mailing out to everyone who's on the Labour electoral list is very expensive. So we made an appeal through crowdfunding and we've raised nearly £200,000 by that process. The average donation is £23.50. We've received no corporate funding whatsoever. And we will not be receiving money because we haven't asked for any either. And we haven't been offered any either, come to that. And because this is a campaign about ideas, but there are two principles behind that. The first one is that I think politics is often run in a completely remote way that turns people off. If politician A is unbelievably rude personally to politician B, and politician C complains that politician A was too rude, and politician B then joins in and says you weren't rude enough, after a while, the whole public have completely lost interest in this kind of nonsense. Personal abuse doesn't work. There's been an awful lot said about our campaign, about me individually and many others. We have taken a decision, I have taken a decision throughout my life. I don't care what people say because I'm not responding. I'm more interested in the politics and the issues that face people in this country rather than allowing politics to descend to that puerile level. So we don't do any of that. And the second point about it is about ideas. Ideas of how we do politics. Ideas about how we develop policies. We have produced 12 policy statements, but they're all there for consultation. There's a statement there on protection of women in society. There's a statement there on the environment. There's a statement there on economic policy. There's a statement there on rail policy. There's a lot of documents out there, and we want people to respond. We want people to put their views forward, take them in, change the document, develop the argument. Every single person here today in Burston has knowledge, has experience, has ideas, has imagination, has inspiration. You, we, all of us should be part of that policy-making process for our party and our movement. No more the idea of some all-seeing, all-knowing leader disappearing into some darkened room and out comes the policies that we're all expected to adhere to and support. Let's democratise our party, democratise our movement, and have policy coming from the grassroots where those ideas belong and have come from in the first place. So ours is about ideas, and the first object is to try to bring greater democracy to our party so that we reinvigorate the branches, the communities, the grassroots, and we strengthen the link between the trade unions and the party at all levels. I'm proud to be a member of a trade union. I'm not ashamed of our affiliation with the trade unions. I think it's fundamental to the Labour Party, the Labour movement and our society as a whole. The other issue that is about this campaign, which is so fascinating, are the numbers of people that are attracted to a campaign based on optimism. All of us here have been on demonstrations. Hands up those who've never been on a demonstration. I don't believe you. There's a brother down here put his hand up. I said, brother, I don't believe you. Am I right? All right, we'll talk about it. But anyway, thanks for being here today. It's a campaign of optimism about what can be achieved. And the events we're doing, all of them are getting bigger and bigger. By Thursday evening, when we conclude this campaign with a rally in my own constituency, it will be the 97th event that I've done since this campaign started at the beginning of June. And we've had meetings and rallies all over Britain, including events in Dublin and Belfast. And Richard Howitt reminds me here, we were over in Brussels for the European hustings as well. And so we've tried to reach out to everybody. And you know what's interesting? Is wherever we hold a rally, the attendance is huge. Not necessarily of people who voted Labour in May or voted Labour 5 years ago, but people who are interested in the idea that there is an alternative to the austerity narrative that's been put forward by the Tories and sadly by our party as well in the last two general elections. Yeah. There is an alternative. In fact, for those of you that were at the Nottingham rally, we had the most remarkable sight of my friend Richard Murphy, who's a chartered accountant, announcing that this was actually the funeral party for Tina. A lot of people looked at each other and said, poor Tina, what happened to her? And he pointed out it was the funeral party for There Is No Alternative. But what was even more historic was this wonderful man who's helped us a great deal with writing the economic policy and pointing out the levels of tax evasion in Britain and around the world. A chartered accountant got a standing ovation at a Labour movement rally. How good is that? How inclusive is all of that in what we do? And yesterday we were in Margate, again absolutely packed out, in a town and an area we've got to win back. We've got to defeat UKIP there and defeat the Tories there. Can we do it? Yes, of course we can do it. But we don't do it by accepting the agenda that's laid down for us by somebody else. Isn't that the strength and the history of our movement? Think of those people that stood up to found trade unions and political parties in the 19th century, our party. They were told ridiculous. Why should the working class have their own party in Parliament? What role have trade unions possibly got in government and issues like that? They stood up against all the ridicule of the popular press of the day. I'm sure nobody here would be so unwise as to buy The Sun this morning, but if you had bought it, you would have probably found much the same kind of story, but slightly differently written 100 years later. Those that are rich and powerful were rich and powerful then, they're rich and powerful today, and they don't like people pointing out how rich and unjustly powerful they are. And that's why we've got to be very clear about what our own policies are. When the banking crisis happened in 2008-9, what brought that crisis around? Was it the greed of farm workers in East Anglia? Was it care workers? Was it those on 0 hours contracts in shops and call centres and small businesses all over the country? Was it nurses? Was it firefighters? You know the answer as well as I do. It was brought about by unregulated banks. It was brought about by the greed of those banks. It was brought about by the unbelievable levels of bonuses and salaries paid to chief executives of those banks. It was brought about by moving money around from one tax haven to another rather than investing in a productive economy. It was the culmination of years of monetarism and then free market economics, which has left this country rather an unbalanced economy where 80% of the workforce work in service industries rather than what should be a much greater number work in manufacturing and other industries like that. That crisis was serious. It resulted in the government having to buy the shares in those banks to bring them into public ownership. I supported that. It resulted in them putting in a large amount of quantitative easing, a sort of loan system to the banks, £385 billion to keep them afloat. All of that so far so good. Two problems then emerged. One was the shares were placed in a holding company, and the holding company is owned wholly by the government, and George Osborne is now using his power as the Chancellor of the Exchequer to sell off a large number of shares in RBS. I remind George Osborne they're not his to sell, they're ours. Secondly, I say to him and to anyone else in the government, in 1997 we introduced a windfall tax because of the excessive profits that had been made by companies that had been taken into private ownership. I think we say the same thing today. Public assets being sold off below value into the City of London or anywhere else, we're going to come back and have a look at all of that. And where there's been underselling, of the value which belongs to all of us, then we're coming to get that value back. Because we need those resources for schools, for hospitals, for housing. We need those resources for ordinary people in this country. And then we had the argument that the only way out of this crisis was austerity. Austerity to cut public expenditure, to raise in some areas taxation, to lay off large numbers of public sector workers, and to reduce or depress wages for all public sector employees. And we were told this would solve the problem, and within a few years it would all be over and would be moving back into surplus. Of course we didn't move back into surplus. Of course it was not all over, and now we have a re-elected Tory government coming back for even more cuts, even more austerity, and even more depression. The alternative is what? That we invest in our economy, that we grow our economy, that we protect the most vulnerable, we invest in people rather than tax breaks and tax havens for the very rich. And so our suggestion is that we use public money in a recession through quantitative easing, in a period of growth through government bonds, to invest in setting up a national investment bank. A national investment bank to invest in infrastructure, to invest in housing, to invest in schools, to invest in frontier technology, high-quality engineering jobs, green energy jobs, all those things that can and should be done. The alternative is to allow the, frankly, ludicrous idea of private finance initiative to carry on, in which you end up giving away public assets to hedge funds all around the world who charge exorbitant amounts of interest and costs on what they're doing, and it is a six-fold cost for the original value of the contract on the average PFI. It's a millstone around the necks of every hospital and every school that has been forced into PFI. I say no more private finance initiative. Proper public investment in it. And so, as a party, we have to face up to the fact we lost the election. I believe, fundamentally, we lost the election because we didn't offer a clear enough alternative. The Tories were there saying, we're going to make cuts big time, but somehow or other, you individually will be all right at the end of it. We were saying, we're going to be very responsible, we won't make cuts unless we think we have to, and we don't like making them, by the way, anyway, but we still might have to make those cuts. It wasn't actually a very appealing message. There was a lot of very good stuff in our manifesto, on housing and a lot of other things, very good. But if the fundamental message was that we weren't going to challenge the politics, and it is the politics of the austerity agenda, then I don't think it was very motivating to our supporters. Clive managed to win by being somebody who was clearly different and clearly offering something different. And what I'm saying is the Labour Party has got to face up to this issue now, so that we understand what the politics of this government is about and understand why we have to put something forward that is fundamentally different, and a fundamentally different set of human and social values. And you think through what this government is doing. Re-elected in May with 24% of the electorate on a low turnout. Half of young people didn't bother to vote. 36% of the entire electorate didn't take part in the election. An awful lot of people weren't even registered to vote. If we can mobilise and motivate people and give them hope, give them optimism and give them participation in our movement, all that can and will change. You'll bring people back who've gone elsewhere because they didn't feel motivated enough by us. Of that, I'm utterly convinced. But you've got to understand what this government is about. First off is the budget. £30 billion worth of state assets being sold in 1 year. That's almost double the largest sale that Margaret Thatcher ever did during her time as Prime Minister. Think about that. Almost double the level of Thatcher's fire sale of public assets during the 1980s. Then we've got the so-called Welfare Reform Bill. The Welfare Reform Bill, which is designed to take yet another £12 billion out of the welfare budget, designed to impose a benefit cap of £20,000 outside London, £23,000 in London, and allow some of our deeply irresponsible, yes I agree, an ambulance is needed, somebody's fallen over apparently. Where are they? Okay. Organisers, please, we need, thank you, over here, yeah. Can you make a space there from the red flags on the left through to where the